If you are able to guide your chi to your hair, your teeth, your tongue, and your nails, called the four ends of meat, then you are in complete vitality and harmony between your physical body and your essence. So the four ends of meat, M-E-A-T, meat as in connective tissue, is written as a song, or they would say a classic passageway within Xingyi Chuan, an internal martial arts that's intertwined with Chinese medicine. Xingyi Chuan means shape of the heart, mind, fist. It's arguably a 2,000-year-old style of internal martial arts that consists of a 12 animal fighting system, and the foundation of the 12 animals where you would develop your root power would be the 5 elements, such as in the 5 element theory that's used. The same for pattern differentiation or diagnosing in Chinese medicine or classical Chinese medicine. So from an acupuncturist point of view, an observation of the health of one's hair would show if the person has strong and good vital blood flow, meaning that they're not blood deficient, and also their kidney essence. So kidney essence would also describe your vitality. So they would say the chi of your kidneys, or your jing, or your essence, which is derived from the kidneys. So energetically, from a Chinese medical perspective, the kidneys create essence and blood. And I know you would say that the bone marrow, but the kidney governs the bone marrow the same. So there's like a circuitry between the bone marrow and the kidneys. As far as when we're speaking about the passageways of your meridians and how chi travels. An example, if you have thin hair, that would sometimes indicate that you may have dryness in the blood or some type of a blood deficiency, as an example. Or you would say dry or brittle hair can often mean that you have a dehydration that's deep to the blood level. And in the Qigong world, or in the martial art world, you would bring up and train to bring your vitality, your intention up to the hair. So they would say you would use the tongue, and I'll get to the tongue in a second because it's one of the four ends of meat. You would raise your tongue to the roof of your mouth, and you would sink your chi to your dantian, first to anchor, and then to raise your fighting chi to that of an animal, like a tiger, you know? And when you do that, it's very specific to turn on the primal side of you. That's something that I would say that a lot of people would say your reptilian mind, you would turn it on, but you would train that. So it's like chaos or crazy in a bottle, you may want to say, and you train that crazy or that chaos in the bottle to hopefully never have to use it. But you would have to know how to use it so that you know how not to use it. Did that make sense? I hope that makes sense. So you train to use it so that you master the switch. So how do you do that in real life setting? First, you can't train in martial arts with sports. It will turn that off completely. You actually have to do almost like commando military style combat and train in such a way to mimic that of real life fighting when you're crossing what you have trained in the martial arts into real life. So practice living and dying is no longer separate to the one who's training, and there's a development that happens within that, and keeping the person alive, such as a student, well, that's what makes it classical, and that's why they added the term art, in my opinion. Otherwise it'd be just martial fighting, right? Or it would just be like training, right? So they call it martial arts to make sure that you should be able to play the flute by the end of the day with your hand training. That's an actual saying. Train your bones and your sinews to be that of steel within, but so that you can still play the flute at the end of the day. So that balance, that finessing of keeping powerful, strong, beautiful skin as a man, and still yet the internal aspects of your hands, the connective tissue and the bone is, if I struck you with my palms, it's not a regular slap. It's going to feel like a hammer just hit you, because the density change of my bones in training is a lot different than a common boxer, even a boxer that hits a bag so much, because again, they're not training to create dense bones in that way. So a martial artist, they put through quantum physics, right? They put attention to keep the density change when you're hitting a bag per se, or if they train in iron palm, as far as hitting certain objects and mimicking that of micro trauma, so that you intelligently microfracture bone, and with the balance of Chinese herbal liniments called Dit Dat Jiao or HIT medicine, you start to heal correctly so that you do not develop things like arthritis, right? Or trauma, but the trauma keeps healing, no different than if you're building muscle. And you already know if you're building muscle, there's like trauma to the fibers of the muscle that's being torn, and the process of the fibers of the muscle, the fibers of the muscle that's healing, that's how you bulk up, right? That's how you build up muscle. Well, the same thing goes with bone, Bone is not separate from, bone is bone, and then you have your ligaments, and you have your tendon, and you have your muscle, so you have different densities of your actual vessel. But the way you train it, even though bone and tendon takes a lot longer to heal and to build than muscle, yet it's still the same concept that if you place attention to it, it will develop if you know what you're doing. And that's what martial art is. Actually, Kung Fu defined in English means to develop your carpentry. So, for example, if you're a full-time student and you take it serious as an example, that's your Kung Fu. So all students are Kung Fu practitioners. So Kung Fu basically means your specialty, something that you're always developing, right? And then there's the Kung Fu of fighting, right? So Kung Fu is not just martial arts, but everyone practices Kung Fu to some degree, right? That's whatever your specialty is, what your Kung Fu is, right? Anybody could pick up a hammer and a nail and start building, but that doesn't mean that you're a carpenter. So a carpenter, that would be one's Kung Fu, carpentry, right? It's not dissimilar to the same algorithm of that of a human body or a vehicle, as an example. So the hierarchy of training that you develop if you're a mechanic for cars, if you're a carpenter or electrician, and as an example for housing and whatnot, and that side, or if you're a martial art practitioner, it goes deep and it's very profound. It's just a matter if the student's willing and able to take it to that deep and level. And the challenge is that you usually get stuck within just the fighting stage because it's like celebrated, and I don't blame you. It's like, I get it, because I grew up enjoying fighting and competition and proving myself and getting better that way. But again, most students or people who train in Kung Fu, they get stuck within that first wooden soldier stage. And I past couple videos, I talked about the 3 stages that you develop within a Xing Chuan construct. Basically the style that I trained in growing up. So that's one of the 4 ends of meat. The other one would be, in no particular order, would be the tongue. So the tongue is the end of muscle. So going back to the first one, the hair is the end of blood. The tongue is the end of muscle. The teeth is the end of bone. And your nails is the end of tendon. So the understanding is, if when you train in Qigong and you train in your Kung Fu, that if you start developing healthy hair, healthy teeth, like in war, you're ready to violently attack because you're protecting your family and your loved ones, right? Or your patriarch, right? You're protecting your people. You turn on your teeth. You raise your vitality and your spirit to your hair, right? There's dances, there's war dances that create this, not by coincidence, right? And then just like a tiger, you turn on your nails, right? And your tongue unspoken so that you don't bite your tongue. Not true. But also the tongue activates the Du and the Ren vessel, which is the conception and the governing vessel of your life force. And that helps to assist in aiding the raising of your vitality. And then it's not part of the 4 ends of meat, but like that of a cat, if you learn how to kind of like raise back your ears, almost like a smile, almost like a demented kind of a smile, and you know how to raise your tongue and your vitality to your hair, and you know how to web and create a web-like sensation with your the webbings of your hands, right? Like that of a tiger or eagle talons. That's how you turn on your vitality. And that's why in a lot of practitioners, they lost the art of teaching that, because there's an art in training in that. Because if you do it without the training, then you can develop, and as an acupuncturist, you can develop something called chi stuck in your head. You can develop psychosis in its chronicity. And an example would be somebody who's always training in sports, that's let's say weight trainers and people who are like, they put too much energy into their head, especially when they're pushing the weights, after a while, start losing their hair. You notice a lot of people start to like recede. A lot of like these muscular men, or you meet a lot of senseis or a lot of martial arts in the past. I don't pay attention anymore, but you see a lot of receding hairlines because that's yang. That's like the hairline. A lot of blood raising up to the hair, but that's a lot of yang chi. You're developing so much power, a lot of masculine, a lot of adrenaline, right? A lot of and testosterone with all that vitality that you're not balancing it out with the water using the 4 ends of meat theory. And so you start to cook the blood. You start cooking the blood is raising your chi, but you start dehydrating, and you start actually over time, over the years, you start losing nutrition to your hair. So it's actually diagnosable to an acupuncturist. I know it sounds crazy because it's not an allopathic medicine, but this is actually studied. This part that I just mentioned in Chinese medicine school, a lot of Kung Fu people don't know that aspect, so it's nice to understand the healing and the fighting arts, so that if you take what you do seriously, then you need both aspects if you're into Kung Fu to some extent, because then that makes you the true carpenter. I revere carpenters, electricians, plumbers, because you can take it to high levels, and because they do it as a business, they cannot limit themselves to a certain type of specialty with just plumbing of this particular house or building. As an example, they have to master all kinds of plumbing. And over the years, that's how you develop your Kung Fu. It's like an equivalency of that of sparring. So many opponents. Or if you're a chess player, you play poker, right? You keep playing different kinds of minds. And over time, you start developing your game and the higher ends of Kung Fu, right? Your Kung Fu. Or in the fighting Kung Fu, it doesn't matter anymore. That's why Sifus and Senseis, they could beat anybody almost, right? Because they're training people, crossing hands all the time, students, big muscular people who want to join the class. And after a couple thousand people, you've refined and you've finessed. Even on a bad day, you yawn and somebody tries to attack you, it means nothing, because you just put in so much work in, not just in cultivating, but you're cross-training with different energies and energetic patterns. So that's why I revere plumbers. I revere, again, electricians and people who are within those trades, because they're doing this all day. And people don't tend to train their Kung Fu all day like that. And if they did, it'd be, oh my gosh, it'd be so crazy. It's challenging. Like even me, sometimes if I have free time, on a great day, I'm training 2 or 3 or 4 hours. But all day for me would be, especially in my early 20s, was maybe 6 hours. That would be equivalent to maybe a professional basketball player. I don't know. Somebody who's taking a series 6 to 8 hours seriously. You understand what I mean? And part of that 6 hours of training might be that you're teaching students. Even if you're a brown belt, you have to teach at some point in Kung Fu, because that's how you're going to cross hands and cross train. It's going to force you to have to think. Humility is going to have to force you to probably get your butt whooped, and you're supposed to be the teacher. And it's happened to me in my 20s, not in my 30s, man. Come on. Who are you talking to, man? But you gotta go through the phase of feeling like you're the teacher and seeing in front of your own students that something doesn't work, right? And it's because it doesn't work, and that's why form is important, because people kind of discredit form, and form is really like a book of encyclopedia. It's not about using form and trying it. It's about taking the encryptions of the form and then making it yours and then putting it out to work. And then not all parts of or aspects of a form is going to work with your physical body or your mind state, right? Or your mentality, right? Famous Kenny Gong. Oh my gosh, beautiful story. If you know any of the Kenny Gong lineage, Xingyi practitioners, which is my lineage, he's like my grandfather teacher, so he's like my Qigong. I had a chance to train under him and have gone to some of his classes when I was a kid in high school, but under my first Sifu, who was his student at the time, when he was alive. His Sifu was a general at a war, and he taught Kenny Gong one-on-one, basically most of his childhood and young adult life until he came to the United States, if I could recall to some extent. And Kenny Gong, again, this is this 12 animal fighting system, 12 animals. So if I'm not mistaken, the general that taught Kenny Gong, because he was long and lanky, he was a snake boxer, so he specialized in one of the 12. It means that you can still work with all the 12, but let's say I'm long and lanky because I just fit like that, and I enjoy snake. So even though I might be using bear or monkey as an example, I may somehow work and change it where it's like monkey with snake as an example, right? Because I'm fighting like that, so I'm primarily a snake boxer. You always see a lot of snake in me, even if I'm doing a different animal within the higher levels, right? So I think that because Kenny Gong was 5'6", 130, 140 pounds, whatnot, his teacher would always tell him that you can't be a dragon boxer. And me personally, I think that Kenny Gong is a dragon, like a real life incarnated dragon. But he never fit the script as far as like being like there's Bear, right? Bear and Shingy. So Bear is like, I'm like 5'10", right? 5'10". But Bear would be somebody who's like at least 5'10" to 6 feet and like 180 pounds and more. And you would think of a human that's built like a bear, like a football player. So they'll make a good bear boxer, because a bear, when they raise their body, they could care less. It's the energetics of a horizontal power of a bear. So in Xingyi, there's bear. And so like if I'm small and I'm lanky, like to say I'm a bear boxer, well, people would say in the Xingyi community, it's like, well, you're not going to be a very good bear boxer. You should do something else, do ostrich. So Kenny Gong was told he was not meant to be a dragon boxer, and he actually changed the whole chess match. You see what I'm saying? The mind is so powerful. He trained in dragon and made everything dragon, and he became the most powerful dragon boxer within the Xingyi lineage, and breaking all of the rules, unspoken rules, as him being told by his own Sifu that, don't practice dragon, but you're not going to be a dragon fighter. It's not going to work because you're not long, you're not going to be long, and you're not going to be able to coil like that of a dragon, right? And no, Kenny Gong, I wish he was still around, but Kenny Gong was a dragon boxer within the Xingyi system. So mentioning both aspects on the martial and the healing aspects of the 4 ends of meat. So let's continue. So I already spoke on the hair. I briefed the hair and the tongue, right? The tongue is the only muscle that you can physically see. So to a Chinese practitioner, I would diagnose somebody with the tongue. I could see 70, 80, 90% of all pathology that's either acute or chronic, depending, and it will show the tongue. Is it conclusive? Not always, no. But in combination with analyzing your pulse from a Chinese medical perspective, right? And the clinical intake and intuition that you develop, right? As a Kung Fu practitioner in the Chinese medical arts. All of that gives you a consensus. So in essence, true blue acupuncturists, and I'm speaking from personal experience, I don't necessarily ever need an MRI exam or X-ray or anything like that when somebody comes to me. However, I do enjoy when somebody brings it, like when an actual patient brings me their tests, because I always tell the patient or the client, I don't like calling them patients anymore. You're the CAT scan, you're the X-ray, you're the MRI. Your body's so intelligent that it gives you so much information. It's just that we haven't taught, using modalities. Allopathic medicine doesn't teach that, to teach you how to extract that information. But your body's so intelligent. And in Chinese medicine, because it's 5,000 years old, arguably, it's definitely older than that, but documented 5,000 minimally. That's where you can train your entire life and make acupuncture, Chinese medicine, your carpentry, your Kung Fu, right? So in essence, in a healthy person, if your qi is nourishing your hair, that means that in Kung Fu you can train your qi to go to your hair to raise up your vitality. You see what I'm saying? If you're healthy, if you're not healthy, I could teach you and you're not going to be able to do it. You can think you're doing it, but you're not going to. Or if you do it, you'll be depleting yourself. Seriously. So the tongue connects the Du and the Ren channel, as I mentioned. So it's kind of like connecting your torus field, your actual aura, to the quantum field. So as soon as I put my tongue, you could play with this. I know it's a weird thing to say in a sentence, but play with your tongue. We're serious here, man. Come on. Kung Fu, man. Come on. Can't be laughing. Pay attention. Be sincere. No expectations. And when you're alone, place your tongue to the roof of your mouth like you're saying the letter L. And see how it makes you feel. Feel your chi. Try not to make it happen. Feel your chi raise, or something will shift. Sometimes you feel dilation. Sometimes you'll hear your lymphatic system actually dilate. Some people who are tapped in will feel their actual third eye tap in, or your eyes. Different things for different people. Sensations in your head. However, doesn't matter what, you're going to sense change, because the intelligent body, once you understand and program your tongue that it's also not just for speaking, but you're directing by raising it, like saying the letter L and the tip of the tongue touching the roof, teeth closed, you're raising your chi. So that's one of the first rules that are unspoken when you're about to meditate, so you can anchor your vitality, right? But in warfare, as soon as I place my tongue there, and I'm just maybe not even thinking of my hair, they say you raise your hair and your face becomes cool like iron. That's the poem behind how warfare works. Now you're plugged in for war. If you do not do that, that's not turning on your motor. And that's why a lot of people get their butts whipped, because they're not trained to turn on their motor before war. You know, in theory, because you could get snuck up on. But you train this in Kung Fu. These are unspoken training techniques that it's actually within all real Kung Fu systems that are either lost, or a teacher's just not teaching it because they don't want to, because people never develop, and actually can like make somebody who's practicing it and nothing else, and they're not training, and then they're anchoring, like I said before, you can actually get chi stuck in your head. It's not dangerous if you meet somebody like me, seriously, because through distance healing, I can actually help you bring back your chi down to your body. But it's an actual diagnosis, chi stuck in your head. You can actually, in this chronic states, you can actually get blood stasis in your head through raising your vitality too much, right? Somebody who's always angry could end up with what do you call it? Thinning of the vein, right? And I can't even think right now. Yeah, I put too much chi in my head. So this is a way where I have to anchor my chi, right? Because I get excited and I get my heart chakra turned on, and I want to speak, and there's a connection between your tongue and your heart chakra, right? So then that's when you can also use the tongue to balance out the chi raising up to your blood. So there becomes almost like a separation. You can actually raise your blood, raise your vitality, especially if you're about to study or if you're about to play a sport. Basketball, same thing. Get into a serious conversation or teach a class. But you also want to anchor your chi. So they say that's when you're separating the clear from the turbid, meaning like the stuff that you don't need to raise, you're actually anchoring it back. So that's why they say your face becomes cool like iron. And that has a lot to do with the instrument of your tongue. So there goes your tongue. That's 2 of the 4 ends of meat. And again, doing that in its strength is actually setting intention to your tongue, your hair, the other 2 I'm going to mention. And if you have those 4 ends of meat down packed, then you can actually also analyze, do you have healthy, this is, I guess I'll go to the next one, your nails. If you have healthy nails, unhealthy nails, it'll tell you a lot about liver issues, right? A lot of other things, right? But they say it's the end of your tendon. So somebody who has weak tendons, right, or they want to strengthen their tendons, you would look for the health of the nails. But if you strengthen your tendons over time, you should start developing very strong nails. So if you have weak, brittle nails, which is common in females, most of the time, commonly, I don't want to say most of the time, commonly, you have liver blood insufficiency from menstruation. Oftentimes, it's since the female is not properly, in the United States, let's say, they're not eating correctly, and they're not strengthening the liver blood from a chi perspective, from an Eastern perspective, then they tend to be liver blood insufficient. And I may do a talk on this, but a lot of females, I always say it shouldn't be a male speaking about this, but I'm cheating because this is my specialty too. I do work with OBGYN related issues, believe it or not. It's just by default, it falls within Chinese medicine. But a lot of women are not understanding that one of the biggest and most important aspects of knowing your body is, like I mentioned, observation of your tongue, because your tongue will give you so much pathology and whatnot. And if you don't know, you can always Google it or reach out to me and tell me, yo, my tongue is scalloped on the sides. That usually means that you're spleen chi deficient, right? It means that your muscles are tired. You're developing a scallop at heights of your tongue. That means the tongue is so relaxed that it develops a scallops formation because of the teeth. So imagine if that's a muscle, then imagine why you feel lassitude or you feel tired. So if you start strengthening your muscle and you start observing your tongue, it takes a minute for the tongue to show up, but if the scallop starts disappearing, then that means you have healed whatever you had within the muscle level, right? As an example. So if you have a dusky tongue, as an example, right? Or really red, like a crimson red tongue, as an example, and you have and you bleed heavily, right? Heavy menstruation. You may be blood deficient because you're bleeding more than you should on a month-to-month basis. So it can happen that in its chronicity that you'll start developing brittle nails. So how do you strengthen your nails? You strengthen your liver and your liver blood. You start eating beets with the beetroot. So you consume 12 ounces of beet and beetroots a day. Make sure you're sleeping by 11 o'clock. Yada, yada, yada. But these are kind of like tidbits there. And you start developing more blood. Not more iron. No. This is how you develop actual blood, but you actually help your liver to start to develop and help to enhance the chi dynamics or energetics of your blood. And because it takes a lot more energy to exert for blood to reach your ligaments, your tendons, and the end of the nail, because you're deficient, that's why you're not receiving a lot of nutrition to the nail, to the ends of the nail or the nail beds, right? And that's, I mean, from the interior, you could think of natural things that you can put on your nails, right? But it's actually always from the inside out. You shouldn't be living with thin, brittle nails. And if it's genetics, like your mom has it, your grandmom has it, and you have it, that means genetically speaking, you're all malnutrition. Seriously. I hate to say it, but you are. So it's like you all been eating the same cultural way. So this is how you can introduce it to every single one of you, right? But in Kung Fu, you lead the chi up to your blood in training, right? And then you sync your chi to your dantian, lower dantian, your lower burner. And then in sparring, you start guiding your chi to the end of the nail. And when you bring lively hands, then you're in training, it's like you become that of a tiger or an eagle. You're able to now take the expression of your vitality, somatically speaking, and through your etheric body system, which does include the 12 meridians. You guide your chi dynamically, depending on your intent, into the articulations of your 10 fingers and your 10 toes. In advanced Kung Fu and in Qigong training, your toes and within this articulation process is just as important as your fingers. And I don't mean just kicking. If you want me to do a talk about that, let me know. I might forget. And then last but not least, your teeth. So again, in some aspects of military warfare, guerrilla style, everything that I mentioned, you turn on, but now you, for a second, you grip your teeth. But with the intent that I want to beat you in warfare, because this guerrilla style warfare, and I'm trained, and I have to take out 100 people, and I might die today, right? Guerrilla style warfare, we're classically training. So you have to kind of like bring the chi to your teeth and your bones, the end of the bones. So it's like you're about to rip somebody's skin off. So when you're fighting someone that has the intent of ripping your skin off, I don't care if you're a boxer, bruh. That person is not going to get knocked out just as quickly in your training. And I'm telling you, I don't mean heavyweights, but I did train in the past. I'm not going to mention names, but in my 20s, I did crossbar with actual professional boxers. I have experience, and two different worlds. Like, I wouldn't go into the boxing gym and train a boxer in her system, right? Because I'll be out of shape for them, and it's like I'll be like level 1. Same thing if they cross over into Thai boxing, if they go into Kung Fu, it's the respect of each system. They're different carpentries, different schools. That's all it is, you know. But the glamour of boxing or the glamour of MMA, and I'm a big fan of boxing, and I did grow up kind of like a fan of MMA once I started to see it. But again, you can't discredit and take away from the other systems at all. These systems are so developed. Just because the people are lazy and they're not training like in MMA, you can't take down and kind of like discredit a system, because that system that's several thousand years, like Xing Yi Chuan, trust, it's not going anywhere. And there's MMA in Xing Yi. I may not be MMA trained, but Xing Yi has 12 animals. I would have to kind of go back into the classics and bring out, because again, up until me into the 90s, ain't nobody was going to be wrestling me in MMA. That actually was frowned upon. So it's cultural, it depends. So I grew up not needing or requiring. So it depends on what the time is, the demographics, and what you're training in, right? But the beauty of MMA, kind of reminding everyone, right? It's reminding everyone, cross-train into everything and every aspect of warfare. And that's what they're reminding you, because if not, we're going to take you out. But I didn't think about that in the 90s. I would never have thought that somebody would wrestle me, because I just didn't see it, didn't exist. There was no Googly or Google or whatever, internet and all that back then. So it's not like I was sitting there researching. You know, we only have magazines, you know, and TV. So it didn't exist in my reality. Otherwise, if it did, if somebody came to me MMA and they would have whooped my tail, which I don't think they would have whooped my tail, because I was like really proud. Like I really had my, like, you have no idea, man. I'm sorry. My ego got there. I'll stop. Yeah, if they would have, in my 20s, they would have taken me out. Honestly, if they would have taken me out, the truth is, no matter how big my ego is or was, I would have wanted to cross-train with them. My ego would have gone 2 or 3 days. I would have disappeared, trained hard in my Kung Fu. Then I would have come knocking on the door. I'm like, listen, can we keep training? I want to know. And that's a real Kung Fu practitioner, man, to expand. And honest to God, if you've known me back then, even now, that's how I am. And that's how I was, Big ego, but then humility just as large, You gotta have balance, right? Ego, humility. Especially if you're teaching somebody with warfare, man. You gotta get people, if you don't have the ability to not contrast, but to evaluate somebody's ego because you've been there. There's no way you're going to be able to teach Kung Fu in modern times with sick patriarchy. It's true. So I had to develop it. And it does come up every once in a while because I get excited when it comes to Kung Fu. So if you could get your chi directed to your nails, that means your tendons and your ligaments, you're getting good blood nourishing to that degree. That means it's very hard, very challenging, very difficult for you to get injured. So when I had my 4 ends of meat, my hair, right, my tongue, my teeth, and my nails, it wasn't like I was focusing on one. I just knew the song. They call it a passageway or song, or right? They call it a song. It's like it has to include all the components that makes it a song. It's within the training. So when you have all your 4 ends of meat, the chi traveling through it, then you don't even think about the 12 meridians and the channels or even requiring acupuncture for the need to heal. You are running on all cylinders. You are turned on and activated, whether you're aware of it or not, depending on where you're at in your consciousness and your vibration. I hope this helped. I speak about so many things, but Xing Chuan and Bagua is it for me. It's something that allows me to see in the back burner and in the front burner everything that I speak about. It's the way that I navigate through life within my outer journey and my inner journey the same. So if anyone's ever interested in going deeper within their own martial arts or they're fighting, I don't care if you're MMA or if you're an athlete, I may not be familiar with that sport. However, in the old classics, everything outside different, everything inside the same. Kenny Gong would say that. And in the higher levels, it's actually simple, actually. It means that you can train 1,000 different kinds of things, but the motor is still the same. The ability to bring the energy to the 4 ends of meat and turning on the motor, like I said in fighting, was the same thing. Turning on the motor right there when you're about to hit the ball with baseball, right? If you're into boxing, that's where I can help to cross-train and to cross-bridge people. Once I understand that person, then it's no different than Chinese medicine. When I start cross-referencing, cross-analyzing the person, their vitality, their insufficiencies, their strengths, and then what happens is that if the person's open enough, then I'm able to kind of like prescribe, right? Chinese medicine, acupuncture, distance healing, and or also qigong necessary to help somebody to actually activate their spinal cord. Start to understand vibrating palm, right? If you're a massage therapist, vibrating palm. If you are internal stylist and you're into fighting and you want to learn how to impact an organ or train for organ damage versus breaking bones, then you have to understand how to vibrate your palm and change the density and emit, right? And transfer the density of what you're emitting from your spinal cord and the way it vibrates. It's very physical. Into the hand and into the person, whether it's going to be their liver, their heart, hopefully not, the pericardium or the lungs, right? Or the diaphragm, maybe it's a muscular thing. And what happens is that then in the higher levels, from 1 inch to not needing space, when you emit vibrating palm into an individual in higher levels, you no longer have to create all of this like density, dynamics between speed and velocity and power to knock somebody out. You can easily cause internal damage. And again, to train to be able to do that and damage, it means that you've mastered your ability to vibrate your vitality from using the scepter of your spine. And remembering your tool as a human and understanding the 4 ends of meat in this way, it can be cross-referenced into anything martial, non-martial, again in the healing arts, and in the higher levels. Since I do so many levels when it comes to metaphysics and whatnot, I'm trying to refrain from it in this one, but it itches, man. It's an itch. Ooh, it's an itch. But everything that I mentioned, I can actually take it to another world and within your inner journey, right? So anyway, thank you.